so much, ma'am, for your talk.
Nathoo is a Canadian entrepreneur dedicated to empowering young people to shape the future. He founded the Knowledge Society, a global innovation program that equips young minds with cutting-edge skills in AI, biotechnology, and nanotechnology to tackle the world's biggest challenges.
In his TEDx talk, Code, Chaos, and the End of the World, Mr. Navid will explore how rapid advancements in AI, space exploration, and biotechnology are reshaping industries and making traditional jobs obsolete.
Please join us in welcoming Mr. Nathoo.
Okay, so I think there's two ways to think about life. The first is that everything is so inconsequential. You know, like what's the point of anything? And the second way is to think that there is some sort of more important purpose or meaning to life, right? Like I think everyone here has probably thought, what happens when you die? You know, is it something or is it nothing? What's the point of all of this? And when I was in high school, that's kind of where I decided, okay, I'd rather believe that there's a purpose to life than there isn't. And it's so easy to just assume that, you know, nothing matters. You look at this picture, right? That circle, that's us. You know, I don't know if you've ever heard this Carl Sagan quote before, but we're so small. But when I decided, you know, I wanted to do something that mattered, that's what kind of led me to start a company, move to Silicon Valley. I ended up selling that company when I was in my mid-20s, ran AI and machine learning for $1 billion publicly traded company, and then left and started TKS, which is what I run right now. And TKS is now the world's largest human accelerator, and I work with thousands and thousands of high school kids around the world. And the reason I do that is because I think, you know, if something were to matter, one of those important things is progressing humanity. And when you think about humanity, you know, this little dot in that space, we've done a lot of cool things. So about 100,000 plus years ago is when we first discovered fire and some of those basic things. Almost 30,000-ish to 70,000-ish years later, we discovered writing, the wheel, agriculture, math, some of that basic stuff. Then it took us about 100,000 years to get to like electricity, you know, some basic stuff like that, about 100,000 years. Once we discovered those types of things, it took us about like 300 some years to do everything else. The internet, the mobile phone, now what we have with artificial intelligence, quantum computing, blockchain, genetic engineering, all of this stuff. And the crazy thing to me is like, what's next? Everything is changing super quickly, right? What is the next gray dot that's gonna happen in the next 10 years rather than, you know, the past 300 years? And if you look at like the past, so when I was growing up, Lion King was the movie, right? Like that's the OG movie. 1994 came out, that was my vibe. That's my childhood you're looking at. Recently I saw Mufasa. Look at the quality of Mufasa now. It's nuts, it's crazy. That's 30 years. And when I think about in 30 years from now, what would that look like? It's not gonna be a better quality. It's probably gonna be you're immersed in some sort of virtual world with Simba and Mufasa and Nala and all of that stuff. And you're probably having haptic feedback of what's happening. You know, maybe when Timon throws something at Pumbaa, you feel it on your shoulder. You know, it's gonna be so different. It's exponentially gonna be better, not linearly. And when you think about the progression of just a movie to everything else, you look at Dubai 30 years ago, so that's 1994, to today, / last year. What's cities gonna look like in 30 years from now? You know, you had a whole city come from 0 to what it is today in 30 years. You look at storage and data, that's 100 megabytes. In 30 years, you're looking at the same size at 1,000 terabytes. That's 1,000,000 times bigger. The same size, 1,000,000 times more data, right? And you think about all the things happening in the world today, and there's a lot of things that are gonna completely change your reality. So there's nobody that is alive today that can tell you exactly what the world's gonna look like in 20 years. Nobody. Elon, Sam Altman, whatever. There's nobody alive today that will tell you what the world's gonna look like in 20 years. But we can kind of get a hypothesis or understanding or kind of our own prediction and what that'll look like. And there's a bunch of things that are happening right now. So you look at Figure. It's a robotics company, and it leverages robotics and artificial intelligence to create humanoid robots, right? And you can think about humanoid robots. This is just 1 year alone we're able to get something like this. What's this going to look like in 30 years? Probably replacing all human activity, right? At least labor activity. You look at brain-computer interfaces. Neuralink is creating a brain implant that lets you control things with your mind. So this is a monkey that is controlling the game of Pong with his mind, and every time it hits the dot, he gets a smoothie. So that's what he's drinking right now, a smoothie, and he's controlling the game with his mind. So what is that going to look like in 20 years? You think about the metaverse. You have things like Meta Orion, which is the new glasses. You have Apple Vision Pro. What's that going to look like in 20 years? You know, all of these things are completely changing the world. OpenAI, I think you guys have probably used ChatGPT. Have you heard of Sora? So it's creating realistic images. So this is just through very simple text-based prompts to give you a high-quality rendering that looks something like that. Like that looks real. You know, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to differentiate between reality and artificial reality already, actually, let alone 30 years. Coinbase, I don't know if you guys heard about blockchain, cryptocurrency, but Coinbase is one of the biggest players in the crypto space, and they're completely democratizing the concept of finance and money, right? You have Tesla. I think you guys have all probably ridden in a Tesla or seen a Tesla, autonomous vehicle driving, right? What does that look like for transportation, whether it's trucks, cars, any other form of transportation? You have CRISPR, which is gene edit the human body, cure things like sickle cell anemia by just replacing or removing certain genes. So we can do that now. You have quantum computing. You have lab-grown meat. You have lab-grown organs, so you can actually grow hearts and livers and kidneys in labs now. It's just being done literally today. You have companies like SpaceX, which is colonizing the world, or colonizing other worlds, right? And now we're able to recycle rockets, which is something that has never been done before. And this is pioneering whole new industries. So when you're in class thinking about, you know, whatever you're learning about in class, the world is changing exponentially every single day. And that's your world, right? In 30 years from now, you're gonna be in my shoes-ish, and the world's gonna be completely different than it looks like today. And you're looking at all these companies and they kind of look far off. You know, it's like, oh yeah, those are cool companies doing cool things. But every single one of those companies had TKS students and alumni working at those companies. Okay, so this is real for you now. You don't have to just become an investment banker or, you know, an engineer or whatever the current kind of societal career paths are. You can think about what is the future going to look like and what part do you want to play in it. Because I think the best way to predict the future is to be part of creating that future, right? And so you can work at Tesla and SpaceX and Neuralink. You can build your own things. So this is Ben. He's also a TKS alumni, and he started a company called Synex Medical. And they're building a ring to detect glucose levels and other blood metabolites non-invasively using magnetic resonance. And they just raised a bunch of money at a $100 million valuation recently, and he just turned 25. Right? So what most people are doing when they just finish university, he's already building a company to push humanity forward in the healthcare space. And there's tons of young people doing this today because you can do more than any other person could have ever done at this age because of what's available to you. If you think about ChatGPT, for example, you could research any topic in the matter of, I don't know, half an hour to an hour. That would have taken some PhD or master's students 10 years ago, like a month to 2 months to do. And so everything is exponentially shifting, and your ability to make change and impact is growing faster than ever. So will you do something with it, right? That's kind of the question you have to think about. And so in TKS, I've seen this, right? Because we have about 5,000 alumni from around the world in 400, 500 different countries actually build things in brain-computer interfaces, in AI, in blockchain technologies, in synthetic biology, working on all of these types of things. And it's really just a mindset shift of, do I want to do it? Because if you find an industry that you want to make some sort of impact in, you have to just take action to start doing it. Because if you don't take action, what's the probability that you'll make some sort of impact to that industry? 0. So you have to take some sort of action. And so after 9 years of running TKS and having some of the world's youngest employees at OpenAI, DeepMind, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, IBM, you name it, all come from TKS. After seeing dozens of young people raise millions of dollars to start companies, I'll kind of distill some advice for you in 3 takeaways, okay? And these are like very, very basic things, but it's the basic things that nobody's doing. And the first one is understand the world. Like everything that I just showed you right now. Did you know every single one of those companies? And if not, why not? That is your future. Those companies could be completely shifting the trajectory of existing industries. Will doctors even exist in 30 years from now? What will accountants look like? What will the job of a lawyer be? It's all going to be changed and disrupted. And so what are the current tools that are being developed right now and advanced, right? So that's kind of the first thing. Do you know what's happening in the world? The second thing is expecting the world to change. If everything you're doing right now is to go to a university and get a degree, you're missing the point. Because whatever you get a degree in is not going to matter in 20 years, in 30 years. There are other things that are going to matter. And if you think about what are the things that will make someone successful in 20 to 30 years, it's not specific domain knowledge. It's probably more adaptability, like the ability to figure things out, right? And so how do you start actually putting the pieces together of what exists today? And then the third thing is build things. Build things. Actually use these tools to create something. And it doesn't need to be anything really complex. Just build something. And all these images I showed you is like 14, 15-year-old kids that are building stuff with AI, building stuff with blockchain, building stuff with CRISPR, because you can do this stuff now. You don't need to wait 5 years or 10 years to actually build things in the real world. You can do it now because all the tools are available to you, and it's either free or super cheap. And so if you kind of follow the narrative here that the world is changing exponentially, you're going to grow up in a completely different world than today. And if you think about your career and everything that you're working towards is probably, going to be completely unpredictable, let's say. No one will be able to tell you what the 30 years from now are going to look like. You have to start kind of figuring that out for yourself, right? And so when we kind of zoom back out to the world and you ask yourself, does this thing matter? Does this little dot that we're on matter? Obviously, like this moment feels so immersive. Right, we're here, we're sitting here, we're listening to me talk, I'm on the stage, you guys are all kind of hearing all this, but ultimately we're just this little speck. And I think it'd be super cool to develop this little speck as much as possible. And I'd rather be part of developing this little speck than spectating on the speck, right? Being on the sidelines while other people are doing cool stuff. And so hopefully, the thought in the back of your head is, yeah, I want to be part of developing the future. I want to be part of pushing humanity forward. And to do that, you have to think different. You have to understand the world. You have to embrace uncertainty, and hopefully you start building things. Thanks, guys.